We gotta go to the bullpen. And welcome, baseball fans, to one of our favourite Highland Bullpen episodes of the year. Yes, we're only hours away from MLB London. We are bullpen bros, we're watching the Cardinals taking on the Cubs and getting to see real live baseball action. For us on this side of the pond, it doesn't get much better than that. And so, with little further ado, I'll introduce the rest of the bullpen bros. We have tonight a full house, a full card. We have Yorkshire Dave, we've got Dave Jr., and kicking us off with some reflections on the Tigers' recent run, it is Alan.
Thank you, Richard. Good to catch up, lads, and excited to see you in the upcoming weekend for the Cubs and the Cardinals. So I probably come here tonight with my tail a little bit between my legs, although we did sort of talk about it in the last episode. The Tigers were shooting well. They were just missing 500. And seemed to be on a good run of form after a disastrous start to the season. And we were contemplating the possibility of them winning the AL Central, which, to be honest, no one else really seems to want to do that. But Scottish football fans will be synonymous with the fact that we then achieved 9 in a row. And like our football teams, they couldn't quite make 10, but unfortunately that 9 in a row was 9 defeats in a row. We had talked about injuries, and they've certainly piled up in Detroit. We had talked about the schedule being tougher. I think Dave Jr. was quite happy to point that tougher schedule coming out and probably thinking, well, they're playing the White Sox soon, so what on earth could happen? So yeah, it's sort of gone the way that we might have expected, certainly not the way I hoped, but obviously, for us, these games are generally played overnight. And one of the things I do when you wake up in the morning is you pick up your phone, you log in to see what the score is. And yeah, you see the score first. And underneath that, there's the headline and the synopsis, the synopsis of the game. And you'll be well used to writing up game summaries and game reporting, Richard, through your time. The one thing that struck me during this run, and I'd probably sort of noticed it before, was pretty much most games, until you get to the 8th or 9th defeat, the headline is always quite positive. We've got things like McKinstry launches 2-run homer, clean-shaven Rogers belts out a pair of homers. Similar with the pitchers coming in and starting pitchers going deep into the game and what have you. And if you read that headline and you're a football fan, you'd be thinking, yeah, he launched that 2-run homer and that must have been the game-winning hit. But of course, they get beat. And that 2-run homer possibly means that it was 7-2 instead of 7-0. So I just thought it was interesting. I'll give you a couple of ideas in my head as to what's going on there, and it'd be good to get your own thoughts. But it is a team game. Does this highlight perhaps the individual nature of the sport, where there's a lot of individual glory, individual records, individual responsibility there? And does it also possibly reflect that individuality moving through to one of my favourite topics, stats? And that you can get beat, but you're on a good run, your stats are going well, and that seems to be good. We love a striker who scores goals even when their team is getting beat, and we look up to them. But let's face it, the old adage of patting somebody on the back for scoring a goal, the commentator's he's always going to come back and say it's a team game and my goal means nothing. And I'm just at times not getting that sense in baseball. So yeah, Dave Jr., what are you thinking on that?
Well, actually, Alan, you're absolutely perfect, as always. I've said this for years.
Thank you. How much do I owe you?
So I'll come back. I will answer your question, and I hope that in doing so, I'll give a good example as well. So my White Sox played the Mariners this week, Richard's Mariners. And again, perhaps a bit more chat on our teams later on. But during one of the White Sox games against the Mariners, Again, who won the series 2-1, I believe. Again, all games felt quite close, and our pitcher Lance Lynn, who struggled so far this season, he's not had a great season. He played for Team USA in the kind of World Series, in the World version. Lance Lynn equalled a Chicago White Sox all-time strikeout record just last week. So he managed to notch 16 strikeouts, which nobody's gone past 14 in the entire MLB this year. So 16 is clearly a massive number, not only across baseball, but for the White Sox, in that it was the most ever. Sorry, tied as the most ever. We lost the game 5-1. So Lance Lynn was absolutely furious after the game. I think the type of man that he is, he was angry at himself that he hadn't been better. He did go 8 innings, which is, again, fantastic in this day and age as a pitcher. I think when he left the game, we might have been 2-1 down, but we were down, and I think the loss went against his name. But when you consider Alan's question earlier of individual glory, but with the team ethic losing out, that's a perfect example, I think, where you've still lost the game. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't mean anything, because that particular day, the offense didn't show up for the White Sox. And although Lance Lynn might look at that day as his best ever pitching performance of his career, it meant nothing. It's like scoring a hat-trick in a 4-3 defeat in football. It doesn't really come down to anything. So, no, that was my little takeaway from last week, but it feeds in nicely with what Alan was saying there. Not sure if those records mean anything to the guys, or like Lance Lynn's performance, or similar type examples.
It's a great example. Dave Jr. is one of the many reasons I'd love to talk to a professional baseball player, or a former professional baseball player, just to ask them on those days we have standout pitching performance, or where you hit 2 home runs and your team still loses the game. Just how much do you look back fondly on that individual achievement against the fact that professional sportsmen at that level, it's all about winning or losing at the end of the day? Yorkshire Dave, what do you reckon in terms of, do you reckon they celebrate the personal, or do you think it's the W or L that matters?
Yeah, it's a bit of both, isn't it? I think they do recognise in baseball that it's a very unusual sport, in as much as teams, a successful team may be just a team that has 3 or 4 wins more than losses. So, I think they take defeat quite philosophically, and the reason why they concentrate on the positive, or a good thing, that's a good achievement from one of their players in a defeat, is that they know it's almost a 50-50 game, isn't it? You look at the standings, and top of the division in the AL Central, you've got a team that they're actually winning tonight, beating the Red Sox, but they were top of that division with a losing record briefly, I think. So it is an unusual sport from that point of view, but there's always some good performances within that defeat, which may, if your pitcher performs well, but your offense doesn't produce the runs, then that's still a positive, because he'll be pitching again in 5 days' time. So yeah, I think that's the way they look at it. It gets less positive when you go on to the sort of fans podcasts and things like that. So you will get positives from the MLB writers who are assigned to that club. But yeah, there's some of the podcasts I listen to, like the Red Sox, they're less than positive, even though the Red Sox have a winning record.
Yeah. So a couple of things struck me when you guys were talking through there, because you talk about Lance Lynn, and it does happen, but it's obviously fairly rare. But a starting pitcher is doing well, going 5-6 innings. So the guy is potentially only going to play 2/3 of the game, and you could leave with a 1-0 lead, but that'll evaporate in seconds going into the later game. So you can see how it is positive. The guy couldn't do any more. So yeah, how frustrated can he be? He's done his job. We don't, in football, we don't take the goalkeeper or the striker off. You'd take a striker off when you're 4-0 up and you want to get some other guy the chance to get a bit of confidence going. Dave?
Yeah, I think something I've noticed as well, a bit of a contrast between football, or I can't remember if it was Dave or Richard earlier alluded to how the sport is very individual, but something in football, if you think about a run of losses, if you interview the manager, the captain, the players, they all tend to take responsibility. Something that I found in baseball, they do reflect on their own units quite a bit. So when it came to, they were talking about the pitching in that particular game, and I was thinking about in football, if your goalkeeper conceded 3 or 4, the striker may turn around and say, normally, Alan would keep those out the net and he's a good goalie. But in baseball, they tend to say, well, Alan had a bit of a stinker today. He really needs to step it up for tomorrow. And I've noticed that because in that particular example, they interviewed one of the other starting pitchers and he said, well, the offense let us down on the day. Lances gave that great performance and our offense just didn't back him up. But conversely, I've heard the same pitchers talking about our offense were on fire today. We just couldn't keep the door shut. So I think they are quite honest, not in a brutal way, but they are quite honest about their own unit and what I always think about the 3 different areas. The bullpen, the starting pitchers, and the offense or defense as well, if you want to add that in. They are quite siloed in terms of what they bring to the game.
Yeah. I suppose that's interesting. Like with football, your strikers, your forwards have to do defending at times, but in baseball, the guy's fielding in the outfield or he's pitching, and that so he's not. You're not allowed to shift. You can't move from one area to the other. So, that possibly contributes to this silo. And yeah, they're doing their own thing. The other thing that struck me as well, and you touched on it, was like the stats. So the number of strikeouts that Lance Lynn had as well. I mean, that's one of the great things. I think it's one of the reasons why we love baseball. There's always a record to be beaten. There's always somebody, and somebody's always got the stats, and it appears within seconds. And the one was it. So the Tigers had the 9-game losing run. The Reds, they did at least a 10-game winning run, but there was some sort of crazy stat that in that 10-game winning run, they had fewer hits and fewer walks than their opponents combined. So one of the stats things I followed said there's been over 100,000 instances of MLB teams going a 10-game run where that happens, and that's going to happen on a fairly regular occurrence. But this was the first time in Major League Baseball history that a team with that losing record on hits and walks had actually won every game, which is actually pretty crazy. It's good production from the guys. They're making good use of what they're actually taking. So there's the stats. So it's fascinating stuff, and it diverted my mind away from the Tigers' run of 9 defeats in a row, as I just sort of thought, let's delve into another thing that we can love and contemplate about Major League Baseball.
Absolutely. And on the subject of stats and history being made, I think last time we were at MLB London, I think if we didn't make history, we were very close to it in terms of the length of one of the games, I remember. And we also had an absolute home run fest as well. So let's hope for as much excitement this time round. And I'll be honest, this is one of my favourite time of the year, but only, as I say, hours away from getting to enjoy live MLB action. So yeah, Dave Jr., are you just as excited as I am about MLB London?
I am, and I hope you don't mind me. I know the listeners might not realise, but we actually do have a bit of an agenda that we do run to. But something that came off the top of my head when you're talking about individual records, a guy's name that's not been mentioned in at least 5 minutes. If I give you the initials TW, our old friend Dave suddenly get very excited in the bottom of our screen. But something we have not covered on the podcast at all. Everybody knows about Ted Williams and his hitting across baseball. We've covered it to quite some degree here. But Luis Arraez, I'm never sure how you pronounce his name. When you're talking about history being made, Richard, Luis Arraez plays for the Marlins, and he is still on course to be causing Ted Williams' hitting record a little bit of concern over the coming months. So I think I've got some stats here. I took a screenshot. This was the 10th of June, so it's moved on a little bit. But Luis Arraez was batting over 400. He was 403 on that date. I believe last night, it came up during the White Sox commentary, that he was on point, I think, 398, which is effectively 400. But just, Richard, while you were covering off history being made, it's definitely worth noting that man is having a hell of a season. He must be one of the best hitters, if not the best hitter in baseball just now. I'm not sure if anyone's caught sight of him over the last few weeks. The White Sox have yet to come up against him. I'm pretty sure he was either with the Twins or the Guardians last year. Because I do recognise him sending us all over the park last year. But that man is on course for a hell of a year.
Yeah, and he actually got back up to 400. I know you mentioned it briefly dipped down to, I think guys say 397 or 398, but he went 5 for 5 against the Blue Jays just earlier this week as well. So he's, absolutely sensational. Again, the challenge is always, can he do what the Splendid Splinter did and maintain that over the course of an entire MLB season? We're yet to be determined. I think 3 of the 4 of us would like to see him go close, I'm sure, for the excitement value of it as well. But it's just fantastic to watch. And let's see, we're seeing some hitting of that quality when we get to the Olympic Stadium, West Ham's home stadium, to watch the Cardinals against the Cubs. And Alan, I wanted to come to you first, because you don't have skin in the game in terms of I know Dave Jr., being a White Sox man, might know who he wants to win. But Alan, who are you going to be cheering for with the Cardinals against the Cubs?
Yeah, Dave's a good friend of mine, so I'm slightly wary of what I say here, and he had the sort of opposite experience for me. So I holidayed in Chicago in October 2017, I think it was, when they won the World Series. So I was actually in Chicago for some of their playoff games, and I'd been to a few baseball games before. I think the Dodgers might have been the only major league game. And when I was in Chicago, I went to a few different sports, and I had a vague notion of trying to get playoff tickets. But my budget didn't quite extend to the cost of those, not surprisingly, now that you understand the whole thing better. So I'm potentially going to credit the Cubs with introducing me to this great enjoyment of baseball. And if I didn't have better reasons to support the Tigers, I may well have ended up as a Cubs fan. I do have a lovely royal blue Cubs cap with a red C on it. I thought the colours looked quite nice as well, actually. I'm not convinced I'm going to wear it on Sunday. I don't know if I want to be showing colours rooting for one particular team. But no, the Cubs to me will always be iconic. So I think I'll be root for the Cubbies.
Okay, thanks for that, Alan. Yorkshire Dave, are you going to be following Alan's example, or are you going to be rooting for the Cardinals?
Yeah, I think I'll be. Well, first of all, I can't not come in on and thank Dave for mentioning Sir Ted. The Splendid Splinter, as you said. It's just certain statistics, even if you're not a stato, there's certain numbers that you need to know in the game. And I've deliberately not checked this. So, and I've got a horrible feeling now after saying that I'm going to get it wrong. But I think Ted Williams, he was only just over 400, was he? I'm going to say 406. So I'm sure somebody will check that now. There's, certain other numbers, and being a cricket fan, you sort of average, you're sort of really good test player will average around about 50 runs every time he goes to bat. And Joe Root, the former England captain, is averages just under 51. Steve Smith, the great Australian, is around about 60. And really that's it, apart from one guy, Sir Donald Bradman, the great Donald Bradman. And again, I've deliberately not looked this up, but in his last at-bat, he was averaging 100 runs every time he went to bat in Test cricket. And in his last bat, I think it was on tour in England, he only needed 4 runs in his last appearance to finish his career with 100 average. And I'm pretty sure he was out for a duck. And his career Test average is, and I'll let somebody look this up, 99.94. And given that the nearest batsman in the history of cricket, I think the best average after that would be something like about 62, 63. Probably a Yorkshireman, Herbert Sutcliffe. But yeah, it just shows it. So yeah, if this guy does do 400 this year, and he's playing virtually every game, isn't he? We're almost halfway through the season. So yeah, what an achievement that would be in an era when I think batting average is coming back a little bit, but the concentration the recent years has been more on the power hitters, hasn't it? So they don't bother too much about the average as long as you're hitting home runs and get batting in the runs. So yeah, I always like to look at the batting averages. Been voting this year, and obviously you vote for something. No, I don't vote for a Red Sox guy in every position, but you tend to favour your own players. But when you get the voting card, you can order the players by home runs, average, runs batted in. So I always have a look at the average. I'm impressed by anyone who's got a batting average above 300. So yeah, I hope he does do it. It's time it happened. So that was not even mentioned the Cubs, but yeah, I'll have my Cubs hat on as well, which I bought in Wrigley Stadium 20 odd years ago. I've got quite a few hats, but I'm not really sort of a great hat wearer, but you've got to wear one to a baseball game.
Absolutely. And it's interesting you mentioned Don Bradman. Yeah, absolutely, far and away the greatest batsman cricket's ever seen. But a good comparison with Ted Williams, because Ted Williams was offered the chance to stand down for the final game of the season where he hit 406, because he was batting 400 going into that final game. And he said to him, listen, they were aware of the historic significance. You can sit out as a double header against the A's and you'll be safe as houses. You'll get your 400. Ted Williams, being the man he was, said to himself, no, thank you very much. I'll go out there. And he went 6 for 8, getting his average, not just protecting his 400, but taking it all the way up to that historic 406. So what a fella, Ted Williams. I have to say, you're a brave man saying you want somebody to challenge that. Yorkshire Dave, you won't be showing your face in Boston again anytime soon if he goes on to do it. But I'll also say, you going, Dave?
Yeah, sorry, no, I mean, you'll never take away the fact that the player that he was, but there are certain records in baseball because although it's still the same game, some of the pitching records will probably never be broken because you don't get pitchers playing quite so many games as they used to do. But I genuinely do think it would be a good thing for the game. Maybe if he finishes up with 405, that would be acceptable in Boston. Maybe not.
Oh no, that'd be the perfect scenario. Let somebody else do 400, but make sure they don't climb above Ted. I must say, from my point of view, just to be awkward as always, I'm going to be rooting for the Cardinals. I think they're one of these teams that they are such a historic team. And I think as a relative newcomer to baseball, it's something you maybe don't appreciate, because in recent years, they've perhaps not quite been the force they were, but they've won one more World Series than any other team apart from the Yankees. And they've got a really storied list of baseball greats in there as well. And I do remember when I first started watching baseball, probably back in the era it was on Channel 5 in the UK, I do remember Mark Maguire setting a single season home run record back in the late 90s as well. So that was something I enjoyed a great deal. So, So I may be that I may be joining forces with Dave Jr., who may well be looking at the cheering for the people taking on his crosstown rivals.
Thanks, Richard. That's very kind of you. Do you know what? I'm not massively swinging either way. I probably will go towards the Cardinals purely for a wee bit of banter. I've got to admit, the National League is still a little bit of a mystery to me. It still feels a kind of foreign league, and I don't really know too much about the Cardinals, other than whenever anybody in America mentions their name, it really is spoken with quite a bit of pride, a lot of heritage behind that particular team. So when you mentioned some of the World Series victories there, it does stand out. I was aware, though, that the Cubs, when we first seen the rivalries, we witnessed the Red Sox and the Yankees, and then they started speaking about the rivalry classic, and I thought St. Louis and Chicago, it didn't really, as a non-American, it didn't really ring true to me. But when I looked into it, and again, I'm sure you might cover some of this off later, but it's referred to at times as the Route 66 Derby, for reasons that probably stand out quite obviously. And it seems that they had a bit of a rivalry, maybe in their heyday, some years ago. So I don't want to steal your thunder in case that's something for later. I still do have a bit of a soft spot for the Cubs purely because of the colours. But the Cardinals, they've got a cool logo. They've got the bird on their jersey. That's something that I'm sure would lend themselves towards Dave as well. Anything with a kind of cool animal within their name or the logo. But I'm really looking for reasons to try and support St. Louis now, Richard, because I think the rivalry part of me automatically wants to see the Cubs lose, but I don't think that's massively held in America. I don't think there's a massive rivalry between the likes of the Mets and the Yankees, or the Cubs and the White Sox. It's not like in Scotland where you're from Glasgow and you support one team or whoever is playing your rival. I don't think it really works like that. It's more of a city support. So although a White Sox fan may not necessarily be cheering the Cubs on, I think there's still a bit of goodwill towards the rival, and it's more of a city pride rather than you must detest your rival. So I think it's quite friendly. We've spoken about it before. The Cubs, if you're looking out with the commercial markets, the big names that are known in the UK, the likes of the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Dodgers, I think the Cubs might be one of the more well-known teams. Our friend that came to the podcast before, Father Zoe, explained to us why that was, with the Cubs being across national TV. I think that perhaps carried out throughout America, but also translated well to the UK as well. So I think the Cubs have got a good following here, more so than probably most, maybe 25 of the other baseball teams, including the White Sox. So I think the Cubs might have the home support from the Brits over the weekend, but it'll be interesting to hear your own thoughts about how you see the series panning out.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that. The Cubs might win the majority of the local support. But yeah, the more I dug into the history of the Cardinals, the more I kind of warmed to them. Always one of the best supported teams as well. I think apart from most of the last 20 years, they've been kind of the second biggest attendances in the whole of the National League. So, the last year they averaged over 40,000. And when we think again of how many games there are in a baseball season, averaging a 40,000 crowd 80 times a season, it's pretty impressive going. So it's obviously a city that holds baseball very, very close to its heart as well. And yeah, so I think the Cardinals are again an original team as well. One of the teams that's been in its home city for 140 years, more than 140 years now as well. So for those who enjoy the heritage bit of it, I think I'm happy enough for my decision to back the Cardinals. And he's not quite as historic. He wasn't there in the opening season or anything, but they've actually got a bit of a veteran who'll be pitching during the London Series this year as well. I believe Yorkshire Dave, that the Cardinals have got an experienced lad on the mound.
That's right. Yeah, I came across him either earlier this year or the last season when he was pitching against the Red Sox, and it's Adam Wainwright. And I don't think he's pitched a great deal this year, so I wonder if he's been brought back as a sort of sort of nice thing that a club tends to do, and bring him over for the trip to London. He's 41. He's been with the Cards his whole career since 2005, so he's only not far off 20 years. And his career record, his season record is 3-1 this year, so he's probably not started too many games, but his career record is 198 wins against 118 losses. That's a pretty phenomenal record, and 200 wins is a pretty big deal. I think that would put him up. So he might get 199 on Saturday. He'll not be pitching the next day to get to, so we'll not see him get 200. But if he gets to when he gets to 200, he will join a pretty elite club. There are pitchers who have had 300 wins in their careers, but he'd be in the top 100 at that, I think. So, and he sounds like a really genuine good guy, one club guy, So yeah, I think he's someone to look out for. That could be, I think that some good bit of knowledge to have in your noodle if you get talking to some St Louis fans, because I'm sure they'll be rooting for him big time. But they've not had a great season, haven't they, the Cards? They qualified for the playoffs last year. I think they topped the division. And but this year, what are they? I think they're only they've got a losing record. Are they bottom of the division? I believe they are, aren't they? 31-44.
They are. Yep, they're propping up the Central, the National League Central.
Yeah, so it's looking a bit tougher. They're winning 9 games from Cincinnati in the top spot. So I wonder what's happened. And I think having bigged up starting pitching, I did have a little look, and I think it might be the starting pitching has not been quite as good this year. So they're giving up too many runs. They're scoring plenty. I think they've got the NL MVP from last year, haven't they? Goldsmith, I can't remember, but yeah. So there'll be great players throughout the team, and it'd be important for the Cubs actually, because I think they've won their last 3. I think they're only a couple of games off, 2 or 3 games off top spot now. So they will be. I think they'll be looking to win those 2, especially against divisional rivals. So.
Absolutely, yeah, which should make it, and it's always great to have motivated teams as well, isn't it? So it should be a really enjoyable experience for us. And it's not the Bullpen's first outing to MLB London, but perhaps we might have to look at our passports in a couple of years' time when MLB have pledged to bring a series to Paris. Ooh la la, we say. That's the one we'd look forward to, I think. And if we can get our passports in order, and if the rest of Europe will have us back after Brexit, then that could be a trip that we could potentially look at as well. Alan, does a jaunt to Paris float your boat?
A random trip to watch sport overseas. Can I take about a millisecond to think about that one, Richard? Interestingly, I mean, it's a big thing now. American sports, I think we've talked about this before, our growing appreciation for them, but they market themselves well. But the Detroit Pistons actually played in Paris. Well, that might be a misnomer because they were playing the Bulls and got absolutely pumped. But they played in Paris earlier this year as part of the NBA International Series or whatever they call it. And I think I've mentioned before, the Detroit Red Wings are actually playing in Stockholm as part of the global series for the NHL as well. So it's great to see. I mean, yeah, I think a trip to Paris would be pretty good. I'm sure we've we would be up for that, and we can obviously take the train over there as well.
Of course. Dave Jr., is that one that appeals to you as well?
As the French would say, Richard, wunderbar.
Thanks, Boy.
Yeah, I think that's, and I wasn't aware of that until you mentioned it earlier, Richard. But that sounds right up our street. I mean, France, not too. We've done similar trips further field. That sounds perfect. That sounds really, really interesting to go ahead. Any rumours of who the teams may be, or any links to France at all? I don't know. I can't think if baseball will be pretty big in France, if they've had big superstars over the years.
Thai France, the Mariners.
That's surely a challenge with us to look out some names, to find some names with kind of French connection we could possibly think of. And Yorkshire Dave, I was thinking exactly the same thing. I don't know if that's a compliment or a concern for your sense of humour, but indeed it would be right up our boulevard, no doubt, a little trip across the channel. I guess from MLB's point of view, the commercial opportunities, Paris and other the world's great cities, huge population, great stadia, great travel links and stuff like that. You can see how it makes an awful lot of sense. I think this maybe they're planning to go to Japan that same year and potentially South Korea from memory. But yeah, it looks to be a real year of travel for MLB as well. And that's one I think we could definitely enjoy. Dave Jr., were you looking to come back in there?
No, I was actually just looking on the website there. So the year after Paris, it's down for Dordrecht. The year after.
For those that are unaware, Dordrecht's the home of just got a few Dutch teams where we like to keep an eye on, but we've got a particular soft spot for Dordrecht, given our previous trip there. I would like to think we played no small part in an important victory for them that day. Is that right, Yorkshire Dave?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And the French like their food as well, don't they? So it was a Michelin-starred restaurant that we enjoyed in the stadium just before the game, and we were royally treated by the people of FC Dordrecht. We really need to go back there one of these days. So it was fantastic.
Oh, absolutely. Well, we've got an amazing weekend of baseball to look forward to, and a chance for some of us, for actually most of us, sitting here to put our own team's various troubles and disappointments behind us for a couple of days to focus on the Cardinals and the Cubs. From my point of view, the Mariners, as always, it's the hope that kills you. I came into this season with huge hopes and huge expectations, and it's just fizzled out. We just don't seem to be able to break out of that pack, and if anything, we're kind of continuing to drift slowly backwards as well. The team hasn't kicked on from last season. A number of reasons, but we mentioned that the pitching has been quite a strong season for pitching, a lot of strikeouts, and the Mariners are really a fastball club now, both in terms of what they're best at hitting and what they're best at pitching, and sliders are absolutely killing the Mariners. They're so noticeable that they're just failing to deal with sliders. And what happens, obviously, in that case is once other teams notice that you're struggling against a certain pitch, what they're going to throw lots more of, sliders. So we've got to find a way to get out of that rut. But it's we'll see where the rest of the season goes. But we're already, I think, too far back, barring a really incredible run to be threatening the Rangers, currently at the top of the AL West, and actually they look like they might have the stamina to do it. I might have been right that the Astros would be slightly less impressive in previous seasons, but I hadn't necessarily predicted that the Rangers would step up. Not phrases I always like to say, but Rangers would step up and have such a great season this one as well. But Alan, I know you touched briefly upon the Tigers. You're seeking, or the Tigers' coverage seems to find a silver lining among the clouds.
If I read the MLB reports, then definitely. But yeah, it's the silver lining as a Tigers fan is that even with the losing record, I think we're 10 games behind 500 or something like that. But it still means that there's a good 3 nights a week 3 mornings a week you're waking up to a victory. Miggy's got back on a wee bit of form. He's been hitting a wee bit. Slow start to the season, so his final season is now going a wee bit better. Injuries have plagued the Tigers. I think AJ Hinch is doing a good job. But yeah, if it's a rebuild, we're going to be building. We're going to be there with building that the chapel in Barcelona. What is it? They've never quite finished yet, isn't it? I think that's what it feels like with the Tigers.
Yep, the Sagrada Familia, Barcelona. Yeah, absolutely. Well, what we do have, though, is one of the pretty regular occasions, where bullpen bros are being pitched, so to speak, against each other, with the Red Sox and White Sox about to clash in a very short period of time. So we'll go first, I think, to Dave Jr. to find out whether he reckons it's Chicago will emerge triumphant from that intra-bullpen battle.
I can't say that I've seen too much of the Red Sox this season, Richard. Again, I feel that the White Sox have been hit and miss. I know the question is more about the Red Sox, but based on recent White Sox, based on more recent White Sox performances, there's absolutely no change in the last 2 weeks as to the 2 weeks prior, the 2 weeks prior to that. Again, my thoughts are it's just such a weak division that, a bit like Alan when he says he wakes up every morning and there's a little bit of hope there. Even the White Sox that have struggled recently with the schedule, we're still only like 5 games back. Sometimes you can win a game and just, I think one day last week, we lost 2-1-1 and we still found ourselves 4.5 games back of the lead. Again, I don't see Detroit as a team to win the division. I would be quite happy to be proven wrong. I feel like I keep saying that week after week. I think that the Twins or the Guardians, personally, I think the Guardians, if they choose to go on now and win the division, they will. If the White Sox just need to get their act together. But as Lucas Giolito said in an interview recently, very bluntly, but very honestly, he says, we're just playing bad baseball. We can't seem to get things together at all. And taking that in mind, to actually answer your question about the White Sox-Red Sox game, I don't know what way it'll go. We seem to be competitive in all games recently. We've had some great series against the Mariners, the Dodgers, really tough venues to go to. We've been competitive up to that 8th, 9th inning. And then by hook or by crook, there's been a reason that we've lost the game. It's just been a poor defensive error or someone coming into the game from the bullpen and losing it. And on the flip side of the coin, when we win games, it's really important in baseball. You need to get some wins where an easy win will sound perhaps a little bit alien to a lot of UK football fans. But in baseball, blowout wins are quite common. You can get that and you can feel that your team can loosen off for those last couple of innings and feel a bit more relaxed. With the White Sox, it feels like every game goes to the 9th. You're looking at 1 or 2 run games and there's a whole lot of stress sitting in that team. So much so that when a team seems to take the lead against us early, the game's over. And our offense really just packs it in. So I'm not too sure how the Red Sox have been competing recently. It looks as if the series is going to be tied against the Twins, as we mentioned. I think the White Sox have done quite well against the bigger ticket teams like the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Red Sox recently. We've done quite well, whether or not they just tend to step up, thinking that those games are going to be on a more national level, more exposure. I can't remember if this particular series is 3 or 4 games, but I'd be surprised if it was a sweep for either team, which of course means that the Red Sox will win 3-0 by the end of the weekend.
It is indeed a 3-game series, and thanks for that, Dave Jr. as well. And Yorkshire Dave, we mentioned there that you're splitting that 4-game series with the Twins, but prior to that, you swept the Yankees, which is always an enjoyable experience for a Red Sox fan as well. So you're hoping that actually that's the momentum that you're going to be bringing to your series with the White Sox.
Exactly, yeah. And I think we did say in our last podcast, looking ahead, that it was going to be important, those 2 series against the Yankees, because they're a team that, if they want to qualify for the postseason, then they're going to have to finish above the Yankees. And they took 5 games out of 6, and they swept them at Fenway with a combined score. I'm going to rub it in. A combined score of 25-8. So the Yankees have gone very, very quiet. Obviously, they were without Aaron Judge just now, but are they? Well, I never thought of them as being a particular one-man team. Is obviously important, but so they went on a winning streak of 6, and that was after they dipped under 500 again. So unfortunately, they have been very inconsistent this season. So we're almost halfway through, and you still don't know really what to make of them. Are they going to be in contention? They're only something, even with these 2 defeats, I would say they're probably 2.5 games back from the wild cards. So that you are in contention at that point. So if they can remain at that level within striking distance by the trade deadline, then you would like to see the ownership and the front office back their team and, go for a couple of trades that's going to help them not only get to the playoffs, but be in contention. Conversely, if you dip below 500 again and you're out of it, then you could see the opposite. You could see them trading some of their sort of more veteran players. So it is really very, very difficult to really predict what's going to happen. I'm sorry we couldn't sweep the Twins and help the White Sox and the Tigers out, but I've just had a lot. I wasn't watching the game today because we're sort of preparing for the weekend, and we're actually going to Brussels after London on the Eurostar. So so we're getting ready for that. But I see that the Minnesota pitcher pitched a complete game. Is it Joe Ryan? And the Twins have won the game 6-0. Yeah, he pitched all 9 innings, only gave up 3 hits in the entire game, struck out 9. So that's pretty amazing. And looking at now, I've watched quite a lot of the Red Sox this season, and I thought when I was looking at the box score, I thought I was looking at the Twins pitchers because I did not recognize either one of these guys. So they went in with an opener who promptly gave up 4 hits and 3 earned runs in his 1 innings pitched, and then pitched out of the bullpen a couple of guys who I'm not familiar with. So this is probably down to the fact that they've had some more injuries themselves. And I was mentioning before we came on air, one of the young pitchers, Tanner Houck, got hit in the face from a comebacker, and he's got a fracture, a cheek bone in his face, so he's going to have to go through some surgery. But they are hoping he's going to be back later in the season, but it could have been a lot worse. But nevertheless, after Chris Sale picking up another injury, I obviously spoke too soon last time when I was saying, I actually said the words Chris Sale. Can we say Chris Sale is officially back after he'd, pitched really well in his 3 or 4 starts, and then he's picked up a fresh injury, a shoulder injury, which is not connected with the other stuff he's had. So, he's on the IL 60, which does not bode well for the rest of the season. So if they can remain in contention, you could see them potentially go for a starting pitcher at the deadline. But to do that, they would really have to give up some of their young prospects in the trade. And this is part of the problem. The podcast that I listen to, they don't think that the front office is Chaim Bloom, who came from Tampa Bay. They don't feel that he's going to be prepared to do that. They're looking for the future. They've got quite a few good players, a couple of good pitchers in Bayo and Whitlock. They've got Jaron Duran in the outfield, Tristan Casas at first base, and a couple of other guys who are coming through the system. So, but they're not patient in Boston. They think they should have a good farm system and also be spending the money to get quick wins, quick championship wins. So we'll see. It's never dull with Boston.
That's definitely true. And on that note, and I have to say, given we've managed to talk about Ted Williams and you've managed to talk at length about a sweep against the Yankees, it's little wonder that Yorkshire Dave has a smile as wide as the Thames. We're all in the Highland Bullpen looking forward to our trip to London. We'll report back on the adventures we have down there and look back on what's sure to be an exciting series between the Cardinals and the Cubs. Until then, for Alan, for Dave Jr. and for Yorkshire Dave, this is me, Richard, signing off, and we'll see you next time on the Highland Bullpen.
Moo!